My wife planned to burn down my house with her lover while I was away, but I came back early and caught her red-handed with a gas can. Well then, game on. My name is Mike. I'm 34 years old, and my life was supposed to be more or less peaceful. Family, home, job, the standard setup for adult life. But my wife, Linda, decided to spice things up in a way I never saw coming. And you know, if I'd known in advance what kind of person was by my side, I might have just grabbed some popcorn and watched to see how it all ended. But, as they say, hindsight is 20/20ths. The past few months have been like watching a series with a progressively stranger plot. Linda started hanging out with her friends almost every day. Normally, no big deal, but I know her friends, and let's just say, they're not the type to keep her entertained on a night out. At one point, I jokingly asked her, "What do you all even do out there? Decide which neighbor wins Neighbor of the Year?" She laughed, but I noticed her smile wavered just a bit. That's when I thought something might be off, but I shrugged it off. Everything became a lot clearer a couple of weeks ago when I came home late one night from a business trip and overheard her on the phone. See, Linda has always thought I never listen and sleep like a bear in hibernation. She underestimated me. The first thing I heard was her saying, "Soon this will all be over." With anyone else, that might sound innocent, but not with Linda, who never says anything lightly. Especially when she adds something like, "and then we'll be free." That got to me. What did she mean? I lay silently in the dark, listening. And you know, if I'd decided to turn over and switch on the light, I bet her eyes would have given everything away. Over the next week, I noticed that her phone was practically glued to her hand. She'd leave the room as soon as a call came in, and she acted as if the whole house were bugged. One evening, when I worked late and came home a little later than usual, I found the house had a strange tension hanging over it. You know the feeling, when something's just off in the air. I decided to stay quiet and linger in the doorway, just to see how she'd act, thinking I wasn't there. To say the least, it was interesting. The next week, I had another business trip, and oddly enough, Linda seemed pleased. You know, like a kid who snuck a cookie from the jar and thinks no one noticed. Usually, she at least pretends to be sad, but here it was like she was celebrating. That was suspicious enough on its own. So I thought, why not play her game, since I had nothing better to do? I was on my way to the airport, and then an idea hit me. What if I just came back home unannounced? Just walked in midday without warning? Oh, how I wanted to see her face when she heard the door open. So as soon as I landed, I rented a car and drove back without a single heads up. A couple of hours on the road, and there I was, pulling up to the house. Even from a distance, I could see her car parked, but there was another one beside it, one I definitely hadn't seen before. So, someone else was at my house while I was at work. Intriguing, right? Let's just say I had no particular illusions, but when I saw them sitting in the kitchen over glasses of wine, I realized that Linda was likely toasting to her happy future. Both of them looked cheerful, relaxed, a real picture of bliss. It was almost funny that they thought they were so safe. Linda was so wrapped up in their conversation that she didn't even notice me standing in the doorway, silently compiling a list of questions for later. And then the show began. I cleared my throat. Just a light cough to get their attention, and you should have seen her face. She froze at first, and then her whole expression turned into a mix of terror and anger. It was so funny that I almost laughed out loud. Her friend nearly dropped his glass, looking at me like I was a ghost. "Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt your evening. Just thought I'd come back a little early," I said, putting on the most polite smile I could manage. You know, the kind of smile that holds anything but kindness. "Mike, you came back early?" she stammered, as if she was trying to process how it happened. Her voice shook, which I found oddly amusing. Of course, I came back early, and just in time to catch her doing what she does best, playing a double game. I took a step closer, still holding that polite smile, and addressed her friend. "I don't think we've met, buddy. Nice wine choice, by the way. Glad someone's enjoying it while I'm out there busting my back." The guy went red as a tomato. He definitely hadn't expected to have to explain himself to the lawful husband. Linda tried to start explaining, but she stumbled over her words right away. "Mike, it's just... I raised my hand to stop her. No, let's not ruin the moment. It's more interesting this way," I added sarcastically. After this wonderful kitchen meeting, I realized Linda wasn't just chatting with a new friend over wine. No, this was something more serious. She could spin whatever story she wanted, but everything was already crystal clear to me. And since we were playing hide and seek, I decided it was time to go all in. Funny, I thought we were a team, but it turned out she had her own team plans. Fine, I can be creative too. So for my next business trip, I prepared thoroughly. While Linda thought I was busy, I installed a few hidden cameras around the house, quietly, without questions or warnings. I set them up so they'd record whenever anyone appeared in the room. And that's how my personal reality show began, with an uninvited lead cast, but they played their parts flawlessly. As soon as I left, the house would come alive every night. Linda and her new friend were practically glowing the moment I crossed state lines. Apparently, this pair thought that as long as the husband's out of the picture, they could do as they pleased. They sat in the kitchen, cuddling, whispering about something, even going through some of my documents on the table. Really? They seriously thought they could pull off something like this right under my nose? The more I watched, the more I felt Linda had some kind of unique plan B. In their conversations, she'd refer to getting rid of the unnecessary, and trust me, I knew she wasn't talking about the old couch. It looked like they were planning to erase everything connected to me. The unnecessary person in her life? That was me. Amazing to think she used to say I meant so much to her. And then, one night, I watched the recording, and there she was telling her friend, and this was the most dramatic line of my personal show, "Everything will be over as soon as this place goes up in flames." My heart nearly stopped. I just sat there, unable to believe it was real. She was planning to burn down the house. My house, the one I'd earned, invested in, poured my energy and resources into, and now she was planning to wipe it all out, just like that. So, once I realized Linda wasn't just looking to have a little fun on the side, but was actually out to burn my entire life to the ground, I knew I had to stop her, smartly. You wouldn't believe how many things flashed through my mind. The first impulse, of course, was to storm in and lay it all out, but I decided to do it differently. Why lose my cool when I could let her play the starring role in her own show? And me, well, I'd be sitting in the front row with popcorn, or maybe a fire extinguisher. I had a feeling I might need it right before my next business trip. I casually mentioned to Linda that I'd be gone for a couple of days again. You should have seen her face at that moment, smiling from ear to ear, eyes gleaming like a kid promised a trip to an amusement park. Naturally, I acted as if I hadn't noticed a thing. I shrugged and left, just like always. Only this time, I didn't actually go anywhere. I parked just around the corner. I decided to stay close to the celebration and be ready to drop in at any moment. Around 10 o'clock, I saw her partner in crime pull up to the house. The guy gets out of the car, and guess what he's holding? A couple of gas cans. Right before my eyes, they both went into the house together, acting as if nothing unusual was happening. I just sat there, trying to process it. My wife was actually one of those people who decided to let things spiral out of control. About 10 minutes later, I saw the glow of the living room lights through the windows. They were pouring gasoline all over the first floor. Judging by their brilliant plan, by morning there would be nothing left of the house. At that moment, I decided it was time to make an entrance, when the stage lights were already on, so to speak. I walked up to the door, took a deep breath, and opened it as quietly as I could. My boots creaked slightly on the floor, and suddenly I saw their faces. They were standing right by the staircase, with a lighter in hand, frozen like they'd just seen a ghost. "Well, didn't expect me, did you?" I said, barely holding back the grin that was already itching to break free. Linda stared at me, and I swear I saw both terror and utter confusion in her eyes. She muttered something like, "Mike, how?" "Oh, sorry, Linda. Didn't realize I was crashing a private party. I didn't even know that gas cans were on the guest list," I replied, taking a step forward. Her friend glanced around nervously, clearly at a loss for what to do. It was obvious that his script didn't include a scene like this. So there I was, standing in the doorway, while Linda and her hero clutched their gas cans. The whole scene was so ridiculous that I could barely keep from laughing. You should have seen their faces, like they'd just run into their biggest problem in life. And you know what? They had. I almost wanted to congratulate them. "Congrats, folks! Looks like your little plot just hit a wall." Linda tried to come up with some kind of explanation, but the panic in her eyes showed that her brain was working at maximum speed. She turned to me and tried to put on a surprised face, as if to say, "Mike, what are you doing here?" "Oh, sure. I just popped in for some salt, seeing as you two decided to have a gasoline picnic in my living room." "Oh, you're asking? I just wanted to make sure the house was still standing." "You know, there's been a lot of fires lately," I said, feigning confusion, as I glanced at the gas can in her friend's hand. The guy just froze. He looked at me, then at Linda, and back at me, like he was searching for an exit sign in a burning room. The poor fool clearly hadn't planned for the homeowner's early return. And you know, at that moment, I was honestly curious about how many excuses he had up his sleeve. I took a step closer and looked him over like I was sizing up his outfit for a costume party. He was sweating bullets. "Hey, buddy, why so tense? Thought I didn't know what you were up to. Did you really think we were going to gather around a campfire?" I pointed at his gas can and squinted. "Oh, is that gasoline? How original. Linda, is this a new trend for your friends?" Linda started mumbling something, but I just raised my hand to stop her. I didn't need any excuses. She and her friend had already made this a spectacle I'd never forget. And then things got interesting. The guy clearly realized that sticking around to explain himself wasn't the best option, so he dropped the gas can and bolted for the door as fast as he could. I barely had time to blink before he was out the door, like he was being chased by the devil himself. From the porch, I could hear the sound of his quick steps and the screech of tires as he sped away, like fireworks were exploding behind him. "Quite the hero, huh?" I said to Linda as the sound of his car faded into the distance. She stood there pale as a ghost, still holding the gas can, not knowing what to say. Her hands were trembling as if she couldn't even hold on to that pathetic piece of plastic. "Mike, it's not what you think," she finally managed to whisper. "Not what I think. Oh, of course, Linda. You just wanted to cook a romantic dinner with a hint of gasoline." "How touching," I replied, unable to hold back the sarcasm. A desperate look flashed across her face, but I had no intention of feeling sorry for her. Inside, I was caught between rage and a strange sense of relief, not sure which one to lean into. Her plan was up in flames, but not quite the kind of fire she had in mind. So here we are, standing in the living room, and I'm finally starting to realize that Linda's double game has been exposed. She really thought she could just get rid of me and start a fresh life. But now she has to face the fire she set herself. We're standing right there, on top of the gasoline she planned to turn into the pyre for my life. The canister lies nearby, and Linda, pale as a statue, tries to say something, but the words are stuck somewhere between her panicked mind and terrified expression. I'll admit, I'm almost enjoying the sight. What do they say? Karma's a slow lady, but when she arrives, the show begins. "All right, Linda," I say, pretending to be intrigued. "Let's hear your version of events. Maybe you were just staging a fire drill to test our alarm system." She gulps, taking a step back, clearly realizing there's no chance of explaining her way out of this. But she has to try, right? After all, she prides herself on being the best actress in our little household. "Mike, it's all wrong. It was just... She stumbles, grasping for words but finding only nonsense. "Just what? Just a little random fireworks display in the living room? Maybe you just wanted to see how the couch burns?" I ask, keeping up my curious facade while anger and sarcasm simmer inside me. She freezes, realizing that her excuses are exhausted, but I'm not done yet. Oh, and what about your friend? I nod toward the door through which he bolted out so fast he probably left a trail of smoke behind him. Doesn't look like he's all that into the idea of a romantic fire. Took off pretty quickly, didn't he? Linda starts trying to explain, saying he's just a friend, that they weren't planning anything, that I misunderstood. Right. Nothing at all. She must have thought I'd just ignore the recordings, the smell of gasoline in my own house, and his hasty escape. Apparently, that's how her logic works. Linda, let's be honest. Did you really think you could pull this off and I'd just stand by watching? I ask, looking at her as if she were a character in some crime drama. I'm almost impressed by her confidence in her plan's success. Everything was supposed to go smoothly. She's silent, and I can see she finally realizes she's cornered herself. It's her moment of truth. Her face holds that same distant fear, as if she understands that her whole scheme has just gone down in flames. You know, Linda, I say, the only fire burning here right now is the fire of my rage, and to be honest, you've earned it. After all of this, I realize it's time to give Linda and her brilliant plan a twist she never anticipated. I pull out my phone and start scrolling through the recording where her entire dramatic act is captured, starting from the moment her friend burst in with the gas cans, and she explained to him how to set up the accidental fire. My personal blockbuster. Probably one of the most impressive films I've seen all year. The cast? Linda and her partner in crime. Linda goes pale the instant she sees my phone. She understands that I have everything, her entire scheme, every hint, every hateful glance, and every sinister whisper as they plotted to destroy everything I'd built. She opens her mouth as if to say something, but I raise a finger, signaling her to stay silent. Linda, you know what evidence is, don't you? I say with a slight smile. Well, this is it, right here. Think any of your friends would believe you had nothing to do with it? Or should I just send it straight to a lawyer? Or the police? She tries to say something, maybe that it was all a mistake, that she didn't know what she was doing, or some other weak excuse. But I can't help but smile. At this moment, she realizes the tables have turned in my favor. Mike, it's not true, she sputters, barely able to get the words out. It's just a misunderstanding. I just wanted to talk. To talk? I interrupt, raising my brows in mock surprise. So that's your version of a conversation with your friend. Gas first, fire next. Goodbye, house. Oh yes, Linda, some talk that was. She stands there with her jaw hanging open, at a complete loss for how to wriggle out of this. I relish every second of it, knowing I now hold all the cards. She never saw this ending coming, where her whole story goes up in flames instead of my house. All right, I say, turning the phone in my hand. Since you love fire so much, maybe you should learn to survive in the ashes, because your perfect little life just burned to the ground, Linda, burned as completely as you plan to destroy everything I built. She tries to grab my arm, pleading with me not to do this. There's something like regret in her eyes, or maybe just plain fear for her own skin. I step back, looking at her as if she were an interesting but painfully predictable character in some second-rate drama series. Linda, you know what's funny? I say, taking a step toward the door. You thought you could just set my world on fire to build your own, but now you're the one who's burned by the very fire you started. She's still trying to make excuses, but I'm done listening. I close the door behind me and walk out. The evening is perfect, quiet, with fresh air. Nothing like what I left behind in that house, where Linda stands in shock, realizing how, in a single moment, her grand plan has turned into her own catastrophe. The next morning, I didn't waste any time. I initiated the divorce process, handed over copies of the recordings to my lawyer, just so Linda would understand she didn't stand a chance. No, let's work it out. Or it was a mistake. The finale of her romantic story turned out to be much harsher than she'd planned. You should have seen her face when we met in court. She tried to keep up appearances, but her facade crumbled as completely as her attempt to take everything I'd built. The judge watched the video, and that was the final blow. She was left with absolutely nothing. No house, no money, no reputation. Her friend disappeared as quickly as he'd arrived, realizing that being the hero in her drama wasn't an option. So here I am, standing on the porch, enjoying the view and thinking, life is a strange thing. She thought she'd won, but in the end, she only burned her own chance at a new life.